Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm back with another episode of The Future Of, and today we're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. We talked about the Habs in the last episode, and now we're moving on to the next biggest franchise in the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs have had their fair share of struggles both on and off the ice in the past decades, and it's been well documented. But now those things are behind them and they can look forward to a bright future. So let's start off with looking at their core. And more specifically, their center core with Austin Matthews and John Tavares. Ever since Matthews scored 4 goals in his first ever NHL game, he's been the face of the franchise. A top quality center with an amazing shot, which I love. His little curl maneuver he does when he shoots is so nice. He's already a superstar, and I hope he can be injury free this season, as he struggled with shoulder injuries in the past, and if he gets to play the full season, he's going to put up amazing numbers. Their other big center is John Tavares, and he's someone I have high hopes for this season. I've actually predicted him as my Rocket Richard winner. If you want to hear more about that, you can watch my NHL awards predictions video. So I obviously think he's going to have a big year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the captaincy this season, and who knows, it may be announced any day now. Tavares is just an amazing center in his prime, and I sound like a broken record when I say it, but having a world-class 1-2 punch with centers is the recipe for success, and the Leafs have it. And now we have to get into the biggest talking point of the offseason, Mitch Marner. He finally signed his contract, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but I think it's an overpayment, but they had to sign him, and now when he's finally signed, he'll bring a lot to the Leafs lineup. He had an amazing season and had the most primary assists when it came down to 5-on-5 play, a pretty impressive stat. He's a new age type of player, and like I said, that new contract is an overpayment, but the Leafs had to do it. They didn't want another Nylander situation with it dragging on into the season. But I don't see Marner slowing down, and only time will tell if he's gonna live up to that cap hit, which at the moment is the 7th highest in the league. And I just mentioned Nylander and his contract situation last year. He's probably happy it's over, but he's not happy with the season he had. Nylander had a disappointing season, and it was well documented, but he's coming into this season healthy, and individually he had a great World Championship with Sweden in May, so hopefully he'll carry that over into the NHL season, where I think he'll have a great season, getting around 70 points. Other than those 4 players, I want to quickly cover 3 more players before we get into the defense. Andreas Johnson and Kasper Kapanen are 2 great wingers to have, who both had good seasons, and I'm certain they will improve on them. Alex Kerfoot is a really good player that the Leafs acquired in the Barrie trade, and he will be such a good center on that third line, giving the Leafs a tremendous center depth. Alright, looking at their defensive core, and the 2 names that immediately pop out at you are Morgan Rielly and Tyson Barrie. Morgan Rielly is a top defenseman with great offensive instincts, and he's been through the tough years the Leafs have had up until now. And he's always been good for them, and I've actually predicted him to be one of the Norris Trophy nominees for this year. And with Tyson Barrie, the Leafs finally got the right-handed defenseman that they had been looking for so long. Sure, he's only got 1 year left on his contract, and it's going to be tough to re-sign him, with him probably wanting around $8 million, but the Leafs should maximize the use of him because he's really good. They now have 2 stud defensemen on 2 different pairings, and their power play, well, it's going to be pretty dangerous. And they still have Jake Muzzin, and they did lose Jake Gardiner, but adding Tyson Barrie is going to make the loss of Jake Gardiner a bit easier. And at some point during the season, we might see a bit of either Rasmus Sandin or Timothy Liljegren. And if you're not familiar with them, we're going to take a look at them more in depth in a bit. But first, I need to talk about the Leafs goaltending. And it's Frederik Andersen. He's just great. He's in that stage of his career where he should be at his best, and I think he will have the best season of his career this year. Their backup situation is a bit meh. Hutchinson can be an okay backup, but that's about it. But they have a good goaltender prospect, and I'll be talking about him later. So that's an overview of the Leafs core. Now it's time to take a look at their prospects. And like I mentioned earlier, the Leafs had 2 great defensive prospects, and starting off with Rasmus Sandin, who was drafted 29th overall last year after a good season with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the OHL, and followed it up with a good season with the Marlies in the AHL. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got good offensive upside, and he's good defensively too. And like I said earlier, we might see him in the NHL at some point during the season, and it might be sooner than later because he's been very impressive in the preseason. The other top defensive prospect the Leafs have is Timothy Liljegren, drafted in 2017. He's someone who struggled, having mono in his draft year, and hasn't put up the most amazing numbers in the AHL, while also trying to force plays and giving the puck away. But it's all part and parcel of an offensive defenseman's development, and he has shown glimpses of the talent he does have. He's a great skater, and he does have a good offensive skill set, and I just think it's a question of when he will really break out with his production. Just like Sandin, we might see him in the NHL at some point during the season, which would be very fun. My first forward on the list is a man who scored 79 points in 75 AHL games. It's Jeremy Bracco, and he's another undersized player, but that doesn't stop him from having elite vision and passing abilities. And he's not the fastest skater, but he's got tremendous edge work, and his sideways skating is amazing. Some of the clips of him are incredible. If he can combine all of those skills, he can become a very good offensive player for the Leafs, but it looks like he's going to start this season in the AHL. Ilya Mache is an interesting player. He's undrafted and will soon turn 25, meaning he's in that age where he should enter his prime. He's coming off 4 seasons in the KHL, which saw a steady increase in his point production, and he was the leading point scorer on his team for back-to-back seasons. He's a great skater and he can both start and finish off plays, so I'm pretty excited to see what he can bring to the NHL this season. And undrafted Russians coming over to the NHL are usually very hit or miss, so the Leafs will have to hope they have a hit here. Another player like Vadim Shepashov, who was so hyped when he came to the NHL and it just flopped. I couldn't decide on what goalie prospect to go with, so I went with both. Starting off with Ian Scott, the WHL playoffs MVP and the CHL goalie of the year. He obviously had a great season. He's an overall sound goaltender with good positioning and clearly has the consistency as well, and will play with the Marlies this season. And Joseph Woll played in the NCAA and put up good numbers, and is just like Ian Scott, an overall sound and calm goaltender, and he's got great lateral movement. He's also going to play with the Marlies this season and compete with Ian Scott, so that will be an interesting battle for Leafs fans to follow. And predicting where goaltenders will end up is always hard and anything can happen, but for now the Leafs look like they have 2 goalie prospects that can end up being starters and take over after Anderson in the future. So those are the prospects I wanted to highlight. As usual, there's tons of more prospects to talk about, like Simon Der-Agosinchev, who was named OHL Player of the Week. But these were the ones I chose, and with these prospects and especially the core of the Leafs, the future is very bright. There are obviously some questions to be asked about their defensive side and their backup situation, but their top 6 is one of the best in the league. Sure, some of the Leafs players may get overhyped a bit, but they're still really good and they should have no problem finishing in the top 3 in the Atlantic Division. But they still have that demon to kill in the Boston Bruins in the playoffs, and they will eventually, maybe as soon as this year, and once they do, it will be hard to stop them. Obviously there'll have to be some cap gymnastics done by Kyle Dubas, but the Leafs are in a win now mode, and they will have their 4 best forwards for at least 5 years, and that's a pretty good window to win. So let me know what you think about the Maple Leafs. Are they one of the best teams in the league? Are they overhyped? A bit of both maybe. What needs to change for them to take the next step? And if you have any requests for my next team to cover, leave them in the comments below, and I thank you so much for watching.